One sudden strike sent the sergeant down and the recruits into stunned silence. In that moment of shocked recognition, 43 Bud/S candidates realized their understanding of strength, capability, and assumptions had just been shattered by a woman they dismissed as nothing more than medical support. The quiet Navy nurse who'd been checking their vitals and treating their injuries had just demonstrated combat skills that redefined everything they thought they knew about warfare and warriors. From which naval training facility are you witnessing this transformation today? If this story of hidden capabilities and shattered expectations resonates with you, consider subscribing to discover more untold stories from the world's most elite military training. Basic underwater demolition/SEAL training operated under the relentless Southern California sun with the precision of a Swiss chronometer and the mercy of a hurricane. Every dawn at 0500 brought the same ritual of physical torture disguised as conditioning, mental challenges designed to reveal character flaws, and training scenarios that pushed human endurance beyond what most people believe possible. The compound stretched across miles of specialized facilities where America's most elite maritime warriors learned to operate in any environment, under any conditions, against any enemy that threatened national security. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had been assigned to the BUD/S medical facility for 8 months, providing healthcare support to candidates who pushed their bodies to the breaking point daily. At 32, she carried herself with the quiet competence of someone who'd spent 10 years perfecting her craft in military hospitals, combat zones, and forward operating bases where medical decisions meant the difference between life and death. Her blonde hair was pulled back in regulation style, and at 5'7" with an athletic but not imposing build, she appeared exactly what her assignment suggested. A dedicated Navy nurse committed to keeping SEAL candidates healthy during their transformation from ordinary sailors to America's most elite warriors. Class 387 had been grinding through BUD/S for 16 weeks, surviving the infamous Hell Week that eliminated 60% of candidates, and continuing through phases of training that tested every aspect of human capability. 57 had started, 43 remained. The dropouts came steadily, claimed by injury, inability, or the crushing realization that their minds and bodies simply couldn't meet the uncompromising standards demanded of every SEAL. Chief Petty Officer Ramon Martinez commanded the class with authority earned through 15 years of naval service, including multiple combat deployments where his leadership decisions had carried life and death consequences. He'd graduated BUD/S himself 12 years earlier, understanding both the necessity of the training's brutality and the importance of pushing candidates to discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed. His instruction methods were harsh but fair, designed to forge warriors rather than simply eliminate the weak. Petty Officer First Class Jake Morrison served as Martinez's senior assistant, responsible for day-to-day training supervision and candidate evaluation. Morrison had completed BUD/S 3 years earlier and understood the psychological pressure candidates faced while maintaining the professional distance necessary for objective assessment. At 6'2" and 215 pounds, he possessed the physical presence that commanded immediate respect from younger candidates. Today we focus on combat medicine under stress, Martinez announced to the assembled class on a Thursday morning that would prove unforgettable. You'll be working with Lieutenant Mitchell to demonstrate battlefield medical procedures while maintaining operational effectiveness under simulated combat conditions. He gestured toward Mitchell, who stood beside tables loaded with medical training equipment. Every SEAL must be capable of treating casualties while continuing to fight. This training could save your life or your teammate's life when bullets start flying. The candidates formed a loose semicircle around the designated training area, their faces displaying the focused intensity that marked survivors of BUD/S selection. Most understood the importance of medical training, but after months of weapons instruction, demolitions, and tactical operations, medical procedures felt like a distraction from their primary mission of becoming warriors. Mitchell stepped forward with professional confidence, her voice carrying clearly across the training area. Good morning, candidates. Today's instruction covers trauma assessment, hemorrhage control, airway management, and treatment procedures that must be performed under combat stress. You'll learn to provide medical care while maintaining tactical awareness and operational readiness. Candidate Tommy Chin raised his hand with obvious reluctance. Ma'am, how realistic is this training? I mean, in actual combat, wouldn't medical personnel stay in the rear while operators handle the fighting? Mitchell looked at the young candidate with expression that suggested his question revealed fundamental misunderstanding. In SEAL operations, there is no rear, she replied firmly. Medical personnel operate alongside combat elements, often under direct enemy fire. Candidate Mark Stevens, a former college football player whose size had carried him through much of BUD/S training, whispered to his battle buddy with obvious skepticism. Right? I'm sure she's seen tons of combat from her nice, safe hospital ward. His comment carried further than intended, reaching several other candidates who chuckled at his assessment. Mitchell continued her instruction professionally, but Martinez noticed the exchange and filed it away for future attention. For the next 2 hours, Mitchell conducted training with methodical precision that revealed extensive experience in both instruction and practical application. She demonstrated advanced trauma procedures while explaining the physiological principles that governed effective battlefield medicine. Her knowledge went well beyond textbook theory, incorporating practical techniques that spoke of real-world experience under combat conditions. During the afternoon training segment, Mitchell arranged practical scenarios designed to test candidate ability to apply medical procedures while maintaining tactical awareness. The exercises involved simulated casualties with time pressure, environmental complications, and psychological stress designed to replicate actual combat conditions. Stevens, Mitchell called out, consulting her training roster. You'll be my demonstration partner for casualty assessment under fire. Stevens stepped forward with barely concealed arrogance, his size making him appear almost comically large next to Mitchell's more modest frame. What do you need me to do, ma'am? He asked, his tone suggesting patient tolerance rather than genuine respect. Simulate an unconscious casualty, Mitchell instructed, indicating a position on the ground beside the medical training equipment. I'll demonstrate proper assessment techniques while under simulated enemy contact. Stevens complied with exaggerated reluctance, positioning himself on the ground while making comments designed to entertain his fellow candidates. This should be interesting. Combat medicine from someone who's probably never been closer to a firefight than a training video. Mitchell knelt beside Stevens and began demonstrating trauma assessment procedures, her movements displaying efficiency that spoke of extensive practical experience. As she worked, Stevens continued his commentary. Ma'am, this seems pretty gentle for combat conditions, he said loud enough for nearby candidates to hear. Real bullets probably make medical treatment more complicated than this. Mitchell completed each step of her demonstration professionally, ignoring Stevens's disruptions while ensuring that observing candidates understood proper procedures. When she moved to demonstrate circulation assessment, Stevens decided to escalate his challenge. Ma'am, he said, sitting up despite instructions to remain still. Maybe we should make this more realistic. Add some stress that actually simulates combat conditions. Martinez started to intervene, recognizing behavior that approached insubordination, but Mitchell held up a hand to stop him. Something had changed in her demeanor, the patient instructor replaced by someone radiating quiet authority that commanded immediate attention. More realistic combat stress, she repeated thoughtfully, her voice taking on an edge that suggested capabilities beyond medical training. You want authentic battlefield conditions? Yes, ma'am, Stevens replied confidently, assuming he was exposing the limitations of her combat experience. Real stress that proves whether medical training actually works under fire. Mitchell stood up, her movement fluid and controlled in ways that spoke of training far beyond conventional medical education. Very well, candidate. Let's make this realistic. What happened next occurred so quickly that most witnesses would later struggle to provide coherent accounts of exactly how Stevens ended up unconscious on the training ground. Mitchell moved with impossible precision, her hands finding specific pressure points on Stevens's considerable frame that triggered immediate neuromuscular responses he couldn't resist or counter. She didn't strike him with obvious violence or employ techniques that appeared dangerous. Instead, she applied targeted pressure to nerve clusters and anatomical positions that caused his nervous system to shut down in ways that no amount of size or strength could overcome. Stevens, all 6'2" and 215 pounds of him, collapsed instantly, his motor functions temporarily disrupted by techniques that spoke of advanced combat training that went far beyond anything taught in conventional military medical programs. The training area fell into stunned silence as 43 candidates stared at the woman who'd just demonstrated capabilities that challenged every assumption they'd made about medical personnel, female service members, and the relationship between size and combat effectiveness. Stevens lay unconscious on the ground, his breathing steady but his body completely unresponsive to conscious control. Mitchell knelt beside him with clinical detachment, checking his pulse and neurological responses with the same professional competence she'd shown throughout the medical demonstration. Temporary neural disruption, she explained to the assembled candidates, her voice carrying the authority of someone describing routine medical procedures. He'll regain consciousness in approximately 90 seconds with complete motor function and no permanent effects. Martinez stared at Mitchell with professional assessment that had evolved far beyond surprise. He'd seen enough combat veterans to recognize advanced training when it revealed itself, and Mitchell was displaying capabilities that extended well beyond conventional Navy medical education. "Lieutenant," he said carefully, "where exactly did you learn techniques like that?" Mitchell's expression flickered almost imperceptibly, revealing something that might have been regret at her momentary loss of control. "Medical school covers human anatomy extensively, Chief," she replied, but her answer satisfied no one present. Stevens began regaining consciousness, testing his limbs for proper function while staring at Mitchell with mixture of newfound respect and genuine confusion. "What did you do to me?" he managed to ask, his voice hoarse from whatever had happened to his nervous system. "Applied targeted pressure to specific neural pathways," Mitchell answered matter-of-factly. "The same anatomical knowledge that saves lives can be used to neutralize threats when circumstances require it." Morrison stepped forward, his voice carrying the respect due to someone who'd just demonstrated superior combat capability. "Ma'am, that wasn't standard Navy medical training. That was something else entirely." Mitchell looked at the intelligent petty officer who'd asked the question everyone was thinking. "No, it wasn't standard medical training." "Then what was it?" Stevens demanded, getting to his feet with obvious difficulty. Mitchell was silent for a long moment, clearly calculating her response carefully. When she spoke, her voice carried weight that commanded absolute attention from every person present. "Some medical personnel receive additional training for specialized assignments," she said diplomatically. "Situations where conventional medical support isn't sufficient for mission requirements." Martinez felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to align in his mind. Navy nurses with advanced combat training didn't end up assigned to BUD/S without reasons that went beyond normal personnel management. "What kind of specialized assignments?" he asked directly. "The kind that require medical personnel to operate independently in hostile environments where the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure often comes down to whether your medic can fight as effectively as they can heal," Mitchell replied. Cryptically, Chin was struggling to process the implications of what he'd witnessed. "Lieutenant, you're not regular Navy medical, are you?" Mitchell's smile held no warmth as she began collecting medical equipment that had been scattered during her demonstration. "Define regular, candidate." The training resumed, but everything had fundamentally changed. Candidates who dismissed Mitchell as irrelevant medical support now hung on every word of her instruction, recognizing that they were receiving training from someone whose expertise extended far beyond what her personnel file indicated. When she demonstrated advanced trauma procedures, they understood that her knowledge came from treating casualties under conditions they couldn't imagine. When she explained tactical medicine protocols, they realized she was sharing techniques developed for operations that required medical personnel to function as full combat participants. As the afternoon session concluded, Martinez approached Mitchell with obvious curiosity about her background and current assignment. "Lieutenant, I need to ask about what happened with Stevens." "He requested realistic combat stress," Mitchell replied simply. "I provided authentic battlefield conditions." "That wasn't battlefield medicine," Martinez said firmly. "That was advanced combat technique that goes beyond anything taught in conventional military training." Mitchell shouldered her medical equipment bag, her movements revealing physical conditioning that her uniform had concealed. "Chief, some missions require personnel who can perform multiple functions simultaneously. Medical officers sometimes need capabilities that extend beyond traditional healing roles. What kind of missions? The classified kind that don't appear in official records. Martinez studied her face, noting details he'd missed during her months of assignment to BUD/S medical support. The unconscious situational awareness, the automatic threat assessment patterns, the way she positioned herself with sight lines to exits and potential defensive positions. How long have you been assigned here? He asked quietly. 8 months, 3 weeks. Mitchell replied with precision that spoke of someone counting time in temporary assignment. This was supposed to be recovery duty between operational deployments. Recovery from what? Mitchell looked at the SEAL instructor with assessment that suggested shared understanding of operational challenges. From missions that required too much of everything I used to be before I learned to balance healing with fighting. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 2 men in civilian clothing who moved with unmistakable bearing of federal agents or senior military officials. The lead agent, a serious man with calculating eyes, approached Mitchell with credentials already displayed. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said formally, though his tone suggested knowledge that went beyond her official personnel records. "We need to discuss your recent activities and immediate reassignment." Mitchell sighed deeply, the sound of someone who'd been expecting this moment. "Commander Peterson," she replied, demonstrating familiarity that spoke of previous professional relationship. "Certain capabilities can't remain hidden indefinitely," Peterson continued. "Your demonstration this afternoon triggered security protocols that require immediate attention." "I was conducting medical training under stress," Mitchell said firmly. "You were employing techniques that raise questions about operational security and specialized training that goes beyond your official assignment parameters," Peterson corrected. Martinez watched the exchange with growing understanding that Mitchell's presence at BUD/S hadn't been routine medical assignment. Is she being reassigned? Peterson looked at the SEAL instructor with patience of someone explaining classified information to unauthorized personnel. "Lieutenant Mitchell's expertise is required for specialized operations that can't be delayed for training schedules. Her vacation is officially terminated." Mitchell began removing equipment from her medical supplies, revealing gear that appeared more appropriate for field operations than standard medical support. The transformation was subtle but complete, changing her from conventional Navy nurse into something recognizably more dangerous. "My operational gear?" she asked Peterson. "Already loaded in the vehicle." Martinez stared in amazement as Mitchell was revealed as someone who'd been prepared for immediate deployment despite her assignment to medical support duties. Her months at BUD/S hadn't been standard duty rotation so much as temporary cover between more significant missions. "Lieutenant," he said respectfully, "what should I tell the candidates about today's demonstration?" Mitchell shouldered equipment that had been waiting in Peterson's vehicle, her movements revealing conditioning and capabilities that her medical uniform had disguised. "Tell them that assumptions are dangerous in any profession," she said finally. "That the most capable people are often those who don't need to display their abilities for validation. And that real warriors understand the difference between fighting because you can and fighting because you must." As federal agents escorted Mitchell toward waiting vehicles, Martinez found himself wondering about missions that required medical personnel with her evident combat capabilities. What situations existed that demanded operators capable of healing and fighting with equal expertise? The candidates would have questions, he knew. 43 future SEALs who discovered that their assumptions about capability, medical support, and warrior identity had been completely challenged by someone they'd initially dismissed as irrelevant. Stevens approached Martinez hesitantly, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine respect mixed with residual confusion about what had happened to him. "Chief," he said quietly, "that wasn't normal, was it? Her being assigned here." Martinez looked at the humbled candidate who'd learned valuable lessons about making assumptions based on appearance or assignment. "No, Candidate Stevens. Nothing about Lieutenant Mitchell was normal. She was evaluating us," Chen added, having observed Mitchell's training methods with intelligence that suggested broader implications. Not just medical competence, but character, judgment, respect for expertise we didn't recognize. "What makes you think that?" Martinez asked. "The way she watched us during training," Chen explained. "Not like medical personnel teaching routine procedures. like someone assessing potential for capabilities we don't even know we're being tested for. Martinez nodded slowly, confirming what Chun had intuited about Mitchell's true mission during her assignment to BUD/S. And what do you think her assessment concluded? Chun was quiet for a moment, processing implications that extended far beyond standard SEAL training. I think some of us might receive opportunities we weren't expecting, he said finally. And I think some of us learned that we still have a lot to learn about what it really means to be a warrior. As they stood watching dust settle from Mitchell's departure, Martinez wondered which candidates might receive visitors in the months ahead. Navy nurses with Mitchell's combat capabilities didn't evaluate personnel for routine medical assignments. They identified potential for missions that existed in the intersection of healing and warfare, where success depended on people who could save lives and take them with equal proficiency. The medical training equipment Mitchell had abandoned lay scattered around the training area, ordinary tools that had been wielded by someone whose capabilities extended far beyond conventional expectations. Tomorrow would bring a replacement medical officer, someone ordinary who was exactly what they appeared to be. But the 43 candidates of Class 387 would never again assume that medical personnel were noncombatants, or that healing skills indicated limited fighting capability. They learned that the most dangerous warriors were often those who could destroy life and preserve it with equal expertise, and that true strength was measured not by what someone displayed, but by what they chose to conceal until circumstances demanded revelation. Stevens stood at the spot where he'd been taken down so efficiently, his hand unconsciously touching points on his body where Mitchell had applied pressure that had rendered him unconscious in seconds. The experience had shattered assumptions about strength, capability, and respect that would influence his military career for years to come. "Chief," he said quietly, "I think I understand something important now." "What's that, candidate?" Stevens looked toward the road where Mitchell's convoy had disappeared, carrying someone who'd spent months hiding capabilities that exceeded anything he'd imagined possible in medical personnel. "The strongest people aren't always the ones who look strongest," he said finally. "And the most dangerous ones are usually the ones who don't need to prove it until someone forces them to." Martinez smiled, recognizing that Stevens had learned something far more valuable than any medical procedure Mitchell could have taught him through conventional instruction. The lesson would serve him well throughout his military career, where survival often depended on recognizing capability in unexpected forms and understanding that true warriors sometimes wore the uniforms of healers while carrying the skills of elite combatants. One sudden strike had indeed sent the sergeant down, but the education that followed would last a lifetime, preparing future SEALs for a world where enemies and allies often appeared in forms they didn't expect, and where the difference between life and death sometimes came down to recognizing extraordinary capability hidden within ordinary appearances. The recruits had indeed fallen into stunned silence, but they would emerge from that silence with expanded understanding of what it truly meant to serve among America's most elite warriors, where specialization never meant limitation and where the most valuable teammates were often those whose full capabilities remained hidden until the moment they were desperately needed. In the elite community of naval special warfare, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had provided education that no classroom could offer, demonstrating that true warriors came in many forms and that the most effective operators were often those who could heal and harm with equal precision, serving as guardian angels who protected their teammates through skills that extended far beyond their official specialties. The quiet nurse had indeed dropped the sergeant in front of everyone, but more importantly, she had elevated the understanding of every witness to levels that would serve them throughout careers dedicated to protecting American interests in the most challenging environments on Earth.